Hi, everyone, and welcome to this 18th episode of the NERPS webinar series on the Peace and Sustainability Nexus in the context of global change. Thank you for taking time to join us today. I am Ayub Sharifi, an associate professor at Hiroshima University, and I will be your moderator for this webinar. If this is your first time joining our webinar, the Network for Educational Research on Peace and Sustainability is an international network of educators, researchers, and practitioners collaborating towards the advancement of peaceful and sustainable societies amidst global challenges. The theme of today's webinar is integrated water solutions for cities resilient to global climate change. And we are honored to have Professor Ricardo Hirata from University of São Paulo with us today. Also, we are honored to have Professor Onodera of Hiroshima University as our discussant. Some housekeeping reminders: the webinar is being recorded and will be shared through our website and social media following the event. If you have questions or comments, you can type them in the chat box or in the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen anytime during the webinar. Please just make sure to mention your name and also affiliation when adding your comments and questions. Professor Hirata will talk for about 20 to 30 minutes, and then we have time for discussions, questions, and answers. If you'd like to ask the question yourself directly, please also raise your hand, and we will try to enable the microphone. Before we start, I would like to invite Professor Shinji Kaneko, Director of NERPS, for some welcome remarks. Professor Kaneko, please.
Well, thank you, Ayop. Good morning in Brazil and good evening in Japan. My name is Shinji Kaneko, Director of NERPS. I'm very pleased to welcome all of you to our 18th NERPS webinar series. During the COVID-19 period, we have decided to expand our network to provide a platform for experts in peace and sustainability. We started this webinar on September 2020. And we have just completed this for 2 years, and I'm very pleased that we reach out to the number of webinar 18th today. So you see the issue of this nexus of peace and sustainability is really emerging and day by day, increasing the pressure to us day by day during the COVID. And also we see the current challenges in the conflict between Ukraine and Russia. The issue is increasingly being of very much importance and important challenge to all of us in the area of global environmental issues and conflict. Now, you all know that the COP27 will be hosted in Egypt, and then COP28 will be in UAE, where the MENA, North Africa and Middle East is one of the area that has quite serious challenges, water, which is also seriously affected by climate change. And that poses also the serious challenges of human security. So the issues today, topic today is quite relevant for coming two COPs, in COP27 and 28, and it is very timely to have a lecture from Professor Ricardo Hirata. I will also very pleased to inform you that the University of São Paulo is our partner university of Hiroshima University. And then I'm very pleased to have a professor from our university level partnership university from University of São Paulo. And I really encourage you to deepen our collaboration in near future with the University of São Paulo. So thank you very much, and we really hope to enjoy your lecture, Professor Hirata. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Kaneko. Now let me briefly introduce our speaker. Professor Ricardo Hirata is a full professor at the University of São Paulo, director at Groundwater Research Center, visiting professor at Chang'an University in China, and International Water Association Groundwater Group member. He's a geologist with master's and doctoral degrees from the University of São Paulo and a postdoctorate degree from the University of Waterloo, Canada, in hydrology and water resource management. Professor Hirata also was a member of the Groundwater Management Advisory Team of the World Bank, advisor for the International Atomic Energy Agency and UNESCO, and also visiting professor at the universities of Costa Rica and Calgary. He also served as a hydrologist for World Pan American Health Organization and has more than 39 years experience working intensively in more than 30 countries in groundwater contamination and development, and also water resource protection management and governance. We're very pleased to have you with us, Professor Hirata, and the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, everybody. First of all, I want to thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity to talk about water and cities, and particularly the role of that groundwater plays in this context. Water vulnerability is a notorious and recurrent problem in Latin America. Drought, that means reduction in the amount of rain, or even the irregularity of rain sometimes, has caused problems that affect many different aspects of our life in terms of society, at the level of society, but also in a personal level. The first is agriculture. I'm speaking specifically about Latin America or South America, and agriculture. Consider that the region, the Latin American region, is one of the largest producer of the food and bioenergy in the world. Water supply and security in cities. Many cities use, of course, all cities supplied by water, and particularly in South America, basically the public water supply is done by surface water. That's, of course, is much more vulnerable for climate change problems. And third, electricity, since there are large hydropower dam systems. Many countries, including Brazil, Uruguay, Paraguay, Argentina, Colombia, just to mention some, has the electricity or hydroelectricity as base of the source of the energy for all needs. Population migration, not much in recent years, but now we are starting getting again problems. But in some decades ago, we experienced a very, very sad situations of 1,000 people, 100,000 people migrate in the country because of the problem related to water. I just mentioned one case that for me is the most impressive. River navigability. We have big rivers, but also is affected by reduction of flow. And the last but not the least, perhaps one of the most important, and it's perhaps a little different compared to the Japan situation, is the problem of water affect strongly, intensively, problems associated with the social and food security, increasing poverty in the region, the continent. And we have also to consider that Latin America is one of the most unequal continent having this problem on the planet. Is for sure, it's a big problem. We have a very strong economy, but we have a lot of problems with poverty, and of course that reflect in food security. This is a main concern for the next government, as Latin America is now in election period. We have a new president in Chile, but Brazil is in process to choose a new president in the few weeks. Okay. Speaking about Brazil, the continent that I live and collect along, Brazil has a very long history of negative impacts caused by droughts. I wanted to mention two recent events. The first was during 1979, 1982. That is pretty recent. Drought in the semi-arid of the region that is in the red, in the circle, in the east of the country, that was responsible for the death of 3.5 million people. In a country like us, with a lot of opportunity, in a lot of water, it's a very, very impressive, this number. Oh, in any country, of course, you're speaking a lot of many peoples. 3.5 in a very recent period, at the beginning of the 90s. But going to more in a recent period, in 2014, 2017, we face a another drought problem that caused a loss of around 16 billion US dollar per year during this period. That represents 10% of our GDP, mainly affect agriculture. Consider that Brazil is a good exporter of food and agricultural goods, electricity generation, about the hydropower, and urban supply mainly in the south center of the region of the country. It means that Brazil and South America, but Brazil is a very, very vulnerable for problems associated with drought that reflects, of course, in problems of socio-economic problems. Another number that I want to give you is that cities hit by during this period, 2014-2060, this water crisis affected the yellow municipalities that represent 50% of the Brazilian cities that suffer different kind of different level of water crisis during this period, the worst reduction in rainfall in the 80 years. Well, to continue our discussion, it's important to define the water crisis as the encounter of three undesirable phenomena to get the water crisis that include reduced water availability. That's normal as a natural cause, but also, of course, we have a strong influence of climate change. The second factor that is, of course, normally is associated with integrate when you have integrated with the first one is the infrastructure deficient that's normally associated with low investment. It's a human cause that together with reduced water availability cause the water crisis. But you have also to mention the third undesirable phenomenon that is a poor water resource management, lack of policies and governance that are also caused by human actions. It means that to have the water crisis, normally you have not just one of this factor, but the integration or association with these three factors that when affect one place, we have the water crisis. But the water crisis, in opposition to water security, is much more than the supply people or supply city or supply an activity, but you have to consider also not just drinking water and human well-being, but ecosystem, water-related hazards, and economic activities. That is, it means that water supply, water security has to be considered all these aspects to the society have water in quality and quantity, enough quantity for all these service for the society. Of course, many other factors are behind these four aspects, including good governance, political stability, financing, and transboundary cooperation when you share water among countries. It is also important to mention when we speak about the scarcity of the water that sometimes you have a physical scarcity, like in this case in Africa, north of Africa, because of the climate. But also it's important to mention that sometimes the economic scarcity because of low investment or in infrastructure cause much more problem than just the reduction of the water. That's the case in the all center of the Africa continent. Well, water vulnerability in city stems from the lack of understanding and the good use of hydrological cycle. I have a friend, an old friend, that mentioned that everybody knows about the hydrogeological cycle, but just a few people actually use in a good way, use the hydrogeological cycle. And actually it's a very, very clever observation. Normally in Latin America, has not learned how to diversify water use in cities, because normally cities offer several waters in addition to the river, that is the most important source of water for cities, but managers have difficulty to adapt a more diversified water system. They just think about rivers or sometimes aquifers, but can't see water in a more broad sense. And because of this, they lose opportunities to provide more water in a more secured way. Cities change completely the hydrogeological cycle, but also offer many other waters that can be used in different way. For example, shallow groundwater can be used for cleaning land, clean streets. That's not potable water, but also is good enough for that. It means that if you do that, you are saving water, saving public water, saving potable water for other more noble purpose. It means that, but you can use rural area, share the water in the agriculture activities, that sometimes you can reduce these activities. That means that you have much more water in rivers because of a reduced evapotranspiration, and this water can be used to supply the city too. It means that there are a lot of possibilities of arrangements that can be used to save water, to get more water for the city, for activities. It means that we are stuck in the idea of the use just one source of water, and when you have just one source of water, you have all your possibilities in just one bucket, and you have something in this source, you have a lot of problems in the rest. It means that in a more modern way, you need to add or to understand first the hydrological cycle modified by the city and by the agricultural activity, to understand not just the water dynamic, but the geochemistry and also, of course, contamination, how to understand all this relationship to get more water in a more having less impact, but also have a more secured water for different purpose of the city. And the city, of course, the society or the water authority that has representation of the people and the society and the government has to discuss priority, has to discuss allocation for the best use of the water in a specific space, in a specific watershed. That's the part, the main message that I want to give during my talk. Speaking about this, consider this reality. This group of researchers and managers and participants of administration, of the government administration in Brazil, create this SACRE project, that's an integrated water solutions for resilient cities. SACRE is an acronym in Portuguese that means exactly this: integrated water resource, water solutions for cities resilient to climate change. Well, it's a cooperation between institutions, among institutions and universities in Brazil, Japan, and Canada, including Hiroshima University, lasting 6 years. It's a long period project, starting in 2021, at the end of 2021 up to 2026, and reached funding of more than 2.4 million US dollars, not including salaries. It means that you have a lot of money for playing and to drill wells, analyze soil, rocks, and water, including different approaches, different techniques, isotopes, etc. It's a very nice and big project for us, and SACRE aims to build a set of technological, scientific, and management solutions that reduce the water vulnerability of cities. That's the main objective, and which after that, the idea is to structure all this on a platform that will allow stakeholders to understand, monitor, and decide on the correct management and governance of urban and rural water resource. The place that you are working is in the city of Bauru. This is the Brazil in South America. It's a large country. This on the coast of Atlantic Ocean, the main ocean, but South America is in between Pacific Ocean in the west part and Atlantic in the last, and the city here is the state of São Paulo, but so here below this star is the city of Bauru. Bauru is a medium-sized city interior of São Paulo that is very vulnerable to droughts, and also is extensively contaminated by nitrate with some emerging contaminate substance in the urban unconfined aquifer that is caused by leakage of sewage network. The city has 100% of sewage network is covered by that, but we experience a lot of leakage that provoke this disperse nitrate contamination. That's a very challenging to understand and to control, and also to remediate this problem. That's one objective of this project. The city is also supplying 50% of the water by a fossil aquifer. That's a Guarani aquifer with more than 100,000 years in the city. It means that it's not a renewable aquifer. And also 63% of the wells are illegal, irregular, but this water is really, really important to keep the balance of demand and source in the city. But of course, there is also a problem of financial losses to the public concessionary, the public facility that represent one problem that you have to discuss. Just in very shortly, this is my almost final slide. The idea, as I mentioned, is to create this platform, the HIMP platform, that's a socio-economic and a hydro-socio-economic platform that involve all these aspects. But basically, the idea is to create or adapt technologies to increase water availability, like, for example, riverbank filtration, increase the recharge, and try to understand better the fossil aquifer to extend the capacity of the aquifer to supply more water in time. Surface and groundwater treatment, contaminated by urban activities. In the case of surface groundwater, we are speaking about basically about the nutrients, including nitrate, and that has this very strong involvement of the people from Hiroshima. Integrated water resource management, it means that not integrate water, surface, groundwater, but soil and people, and perception, awareness, and social mobilization, because we know that if you don't have these actors involved in the process, it's not possible to have a real management of the aquifer and rivers, or it means water for the city. Good technological solution is nice, but it has to be accepted by the society. Well, the last slide, most important message, coping with the current water problems and those aggravated by global climate change should integrate the various water in the hydrological cycle. Groundwater is still little used in Latin America and can be an essential solution to global climate change, and as they combine low-cost groundwater, easy access, and large storage that also regulate the extraction without recharge for a long period. This is a big water tank below the cities, and that you have to use in this way. The concept of a public supply with a single source should be avoided, and we have to use more groundwater in a conjunctive and with the surface water fashion, and allow complementary private supply through wells in cities. In Bauru, particularly, 25% of all demand is attended by private wells that is not really incorporated in the public water system, but is also important in a city that annually suffer by reduction of the water. And the last, the function of aquifer and the relationship with the rest of the socio-economic hydrogeological cycle is essential to creating efficient management policy. Well, this is my presentation. Sorry, I just extend a little bit of the time, but thank you again for the organizers for giving me this opportunity to talk briefly about our project, but about mainly the concept behind it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Hirata. And I don't think you extended beyond the time. It was very well organized. Thank you very much. I would like to invite Professor Onodera for some comments and discussions, and perhaps also some more insights on the collaboration between the two institutions, and also other issues related to water management.
Okay, thank you for introduction, and thank you for Ricardo. Thank you for a nice presentation. Okay, I want to talk with slides. So this is a presentation slide in the last week in the University of São Paulo with Ricardo. So then I basically I want to talk using this slide, but today for discussing with Ricardo, so I want to show the comparison of the water security in Brazil and Japan, and also the recycling system of our proposed system, the nitrate pollution water to farmland in Japan. Okay. So first of all, I want to show the water security in the world scales. So this slide, this figure showed Stefan's the planetary boundaries results in science papers. So then the red color show that the high risk part in freshwater use. So as you can see, the US and China and India is so high risk. On the other hand, Japan, also Brazil is a little bit low risk. So even that, so we have some freshwater risk. So then I want to talk the comparative situation Brazil and Japan for the water resource. First of all, this shows that the groundwater spatial distributions. So then this as you can see that this slide shows this figure shows the modern groundwater distribution. Modern groundwater meaning the safety use, but that they separate the modern groundwater and the fossil groundwaters. So as you can see that Brazil is a little bit smaller than Japan. So then we can say that Japan is a high, Brazil is a high risk of the volumetric water volumes. So then because of the less recharge in the Brazil and also high demand of the waters in Brazil for agriculture and humans. So, and the next I want to show that pollution status in Brazil and Japan. So this figure shows that population densities in Brazil and Japan. So as you can see, the high population in Japan rather than Brazil, and also the based on the FAO. So nitrogen fertilizer consumption per unit areas, that value is that Japan is higher, much higher than Brazil. So totally 4 times. So based on these data, so we can say that pollution status is more serious in Japan. So also I want to show that Hiroshima region, that this region, we say that coastal region in Seto Inland Sea. So this figure shows the annual precipitation variation from 1970 to 2020. So as you can see, the yellow color shows the drought periods, drought years, and the red color shows heavy rain years. So that already Ricardo talked about the climate change effect on the groundwater resource. So in here also we can see the high risk of the climate change impact on also the water resource. So also that this region, the annual precipitation is totally smaller than the Japanese average values. So then we need to also manage the water resource in this area. Also that Ricardo mentioned that we need to make the policy and governance. So that process is so important. Then finally, I want to introduce our system of the nitrogen and water recycling system for saving the water resource and also the recycle of the saving of the nitrate fertilizer applications. So as you know, the pollution of the nitrate in the groundwater, but that water is just, we can say that eutrophic groundwater. So that meaning that this groundwater can apply to the agricultural land. So then we use this schematic diagrams. Sorry. So based on these systems, so the polluted and eutrophic groundwater is suitable to recycling for the crop lands. So then we can cut some fertilizers and also the water resource. So basically, our Japanese seeds, also Brazilian seeds, so that we want to combine to approach to his big project also. So now later we will discuss mainly his project and also the Brazilian system and groundwater, also that any. Okay, please go to the discussion time. So
thank you very much, Professor Onedera, for the very insightful presentation. Now I'd like to invite all the attendees to share their comments, questions, and any other feedback. So again, if you would like to speak directly to our presenters, please just raise your hand and I can enable your microphone. You can, yeah, we have one question, I think. This is for Hirata Sensei. I just read the question. Thank you very much for your great talk today. I have a very basic question about water resource utilization in Brazil. How much is the percentages of surface water and groundwater for water resources in the states of Brazil? Is it very difficult, very different between cities and rural areas?
Oh, yes, I think it's an interesting question because if you consider the water supply for cities, basically Brazil uses a lot of surface water. Because of many reasons, we have large rivers, and traditionally the group of engineering that's much more responsible for water supply in companies are trained using surface water. Groundwater is not so popular among technical people. It's a new topic for many people. And now we are introducing groundwater as an important and reliable source that is not, as I mentioned, so common for everybody. It means that if you consider the water supply for public water supply, cities, basically, you are speaking 90% of the whole population use surface water. Just 10% use groundwater. Means that's one number, interesting number. When you go to the size of the city, it means how many cities, how many municipalities, that's our administration system, municipalities, how many municipalities use groundwater as a primary source, the number inverts completely. 50% or 52% of the cities or municipalities in the country are based on groundwater. It means small and also medium-sized cities use groundwater extensively, but not big cities. Big cities, that's more populated cities, use surface water. That's pretty bring normal. Normally, groundwater is a very nice and very low cost solution for small cities. Normally, when you go to the big cities, the competitively surface water is much better or better than groundwater in terms of cost, in terms of because you need a very strong volume of water for supply big cities like São Paulo, 22 millions, like many other big cities in Japan. But one interesting thing, although for population 10% are based on groundwater, use groundwater, you have to consider that groundwater, the other 90% of groundwater that the population use comes from private wells. You have more than 2.5, almost 3 million tubular wells. It means wells, deep wells, that is actually supply a lot of water. It means that groundwater is important in Brazil and because of the extraction of the private wells. Our resource is a public government society owner source water, but the extraction is done by private wells. It means that private wells plays a very important role for the water security in the cities and also in the field. In the field, all the farm activities use extensively groundwater, except for irrigation of large areas like soybean, this type of things that normally will have a lot of rain that use this. But for orange, for fruits, for many others situations, you use recharge. It means groundwater is really important for the country, much more than the perception of the managers, because surface water supply, public water supply is based on majority in surface water, but groundwater has this importance as to add much more water in city. Just one short number, São Paulo, for example, is totally supplied by surface water. My metropolitan area, 22 million people. Just 1% use groundwater in terms of population. But the metropolitan area has 13,000 wells, private wells, that supply 12 or 13 cubic meters per second of groundwater. It means that these represent 20% or 18% of, attain the 80% of the population demand. It means when you go to official statistic about the use of the water, groundwater represents just 1%. But in reality, because of the private wells, groundwater plays the importance for 18% of the total demand. Groundwater is under the radar in the country. It means that there's a lot of numbers. I can provide much more numbers in this way, but officially we have one situation. But in reality, groundwater is much more important for all activities in the country, rural and urban purpose.
Thank you very much for a very detailed answer. We still have time for more questions and comments, so please feel free to raise your questions. So while waiting for further questions, let me ask one question. You correctly mentioned the importance of diversification for enhancing resilience. And also you now elaborated on the importance of paying attention to groundwater as well. I just want to know if we go into the details of surface water management and also groundwater management, what kind of measures have been taken in the context of Brazil to improve and further diversify this water management techniques, for instance, when it comes to green infrastructure or nature-based solutions that could also provide co-benefits for flood management, for instance. I would like to have your opinion on those. Thank you.
Yes, I think it is a very important question. I didn't have time to mention in detail, for example, even our project or the others that we are running here in our group or the other groups in Brazil. But actually the idea, as you mentioned, is try to use all this water that has the distribution in time, in space, indifferently. No, sometimes you have a lot of water, but it just represent the floods and a lot of runoff water that is not available for any other except for create problems in cities. But also in opposition, we have a drought, long drought that because of climate change is getting worse. The idea is basically to understand the water in time and in space for the whole watershed, and how to, and in terms of quantity, quality, and how to use each water, or if it's necessary to treat the water or to store the water or to infiltrate the water, how to do it in a most not expensive way, using normally nature-based solution. Like, for example, you have in our project, that exactly the project that the Shiniti is working on. We have in a green area, a large green area in the center of Bauru city, that cities that we are studying, and you have a drainage at a small river that is just cut the area in the east part of the zone, and that's contaminated by urban sewage, basically urban groundwater. The idea is to install some riverbank wells close to the river that take a mixture of water of the river and the aquifer, but basically from the river, filter this water. It means remove part of the contaminant, pump this water in a green area and use this water as part of the nutrient, because there's a lot of nutrient, and use the trees for phytoremediation and provoke much more, for example, recharge. It means that we increase the amount of water in this shallow aquifer, increase the water by recharge, and also treat the water. As this is one type of solution that we are working. Another possibility is using an extensive line of wells in close to the river and use both sources. But the project also work with how to expand this solution that is in pilot scale to the rest of the city. In this case, you are trying to understand using numerical model to simulate how efficient is this way. This is a part of the project, perhaps is a good solution. But good solutions in Brazil, in many other, I have worked in many countries in South America, Latin America. Normally you have, as a technician, we can have a very good project, but it's not acceptable by the society. This is the big concern in groundwater, mainly because solutions in groundwater is based on the personal or private solution, like one well. It means that it's something that you, as an individual, control the extraction. And if you are not get involved in a more collective solution, it means that it's a type of a problem that you have a tragedy of commons. You know, the tragedy of commons is very typical for groundwater. It means that's a good solution, personal good solution for you, but the sum of all private solutions create a collective solutions that with very, very difficult to solve. Groundwater is very, very typical for this. I have a very good solution. My neighbor has a very good solution. The other. In total, my neighborhood has a big problem, and that is a concern for everybody, but the responsibility is nobody is responsible for that, because individually it's responsible, but it's not a big problem, but collectively, yes. This is a problem, and you have to break this logic, it means that the involvement and acceptability of the people has to be put in place. Otherwise, you don't have the solution for this. Groundwater has these problems that are very typical in this way. It means that you have to involve stakeholders, users, that's part of stakeholders, government at different levels, because each of the governments control part of this stuff, like land, control of effluents, groundwater source, surface water and environment, etc., etc., etc. Many different institutions you have to put together. That is not easy in a country that in Brazil, like the democracy is pretty new. The idea of institutionality in Brazil is really new. And you have to overcome this problem to get a reliable, acceptable, simple system to get better water management. I think Japan has much more facility in this way, Europe and Canada, than in countries like Brazil or developing countries like Latin American countries.
Thank you. Speaking of developing countries, we have a question about the recent developments in Pakistan. It's from Dr. Shamim. And the question is that at this time in Pakistan, we are facing huge flood due to climate change. Kindly suggest that after having this damage and flash flood, how can we manage to use this contaminated groundwater for future drinking purposes?
Yeah, it's a problem. I don't know. Perhaps Shinichi can add from his experience how to manage this surface bad quality water, but you have a flash because you have a very large amount of water. That part is run off. It's just a small part is recharged, no? But you have to consider that groundwater is a big reactor to reduce contamination. That means that a natural recharge is a natural reactor that reduces contamination. But I think that you have to study and to see how prolonged is this problem of excess of water, and how to understand the vulnerability of the aquifer. I think that there's a balance in this way. But I think Shinichi has much more experience than me in this aspect, no?
Professor Onedera, you please.
Okay, so thank you for your question. But the flash flood is so serious in the I know that Pakistan is so the huge catchment size. So in that case, the totally so big issue for even the quantify of the serious damage. So that one is also the unknown issues. So that basically we need to quantify. Then later, so we should manage. But that before after management stage, so we need to use the groundwater, surface water interaction, and also the vegetation uptake. That some such type of the bioremediation system also we need to use. So that issue is that I think that future big issue. So we need to approach. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. There is one more question. I think you touched on this to a large extent, but it's an anonymous attendee. The question is, how can good urban governance improve integrated water management? So if you could further elaborate on that.
Oh, that's $1 million question.
Yeah.
It's not the easy answer. Actually, it's a big challenge for us. I have worked with governance and water management, particularly groundwater, for the World Bank, now for International Water Association. And That's a big concern. And actually, one challenging for us, good example from rich countries, including Japan, German, European, East European, West European countries, Canada. There are some models that work, perfectly for that situations. But you have to consider that institution now, the structure of institutions, government institutions in countries, in undeveloped countries, in poor countries are not strong and not actually accepted by the society. Normally, the society has a very, say, difficult relationship with this institution. Normally, also associated with the democracy. Democracy is part of the democratic process. Is sometimes new from some of this country, like in my country or like many countries in Latin America, like in many countries in Africa, in part of Asia. And that does not help much because it's not create a trust relationship between society and the government. And on the other hand, the government needs some money to run management process. And from the society point of view, they don't think about tax as part of the process to improve the management, but they think that a new tax associated with water is just a new tax. It means that the government wants to get more money from the society. It means that it's not create a good relationship between actors and the government. That means that there's a lot of difficulties associated in this point, how to get a good management process. I think that we have to create mechanisms to involve people, not to get more awareness in general terms, but create a real concrete actions from the government to the society, try to help them how to use in a good way groundwater, how to use surface water for themselves. It means that they say, okay, I'm not just charging you because you are using the water, but I can help you to use this water in a more broad sense, in a particular sense, and how to create establishing this good relationship and try to convince them based on these actions, how to convince them to be part of the process of management. When we speak about surface water, it's a little bit easier in terms that you have less users than compared to groundwater. Groundwater normally is done by thousands of wells that normally is distributed among the cities. When we speak about cities, it means that you have one block, one well. You have two other blocks, other wells. It means that when you construct the wells just has 1 square meter. After the construction, it's just one tube with a place of 1 square meters. It means this is really, really small. And you can put this on the parking lot. You can put this everywhere. It's really difficult to find when you haven't finished the well. It means that you have a lot of illegal wells because the government also don't have the capacity to monitor, to fiscalize all these wells. It means that the user has to be part of the process. It's a communication problem, it's a communication action, and you have to be creative to be that. Information is not awareness. That's also important. It's not say, okay, you put on the newspaper, oh, groundwater is important. Who cares? Who cares? Except for the government that has this responsibility, the normal, common people say, okay, groundwater is important, but who cares in terms of this? You need really to convince in a practical basis that he has to participate in this process. I think this is a big challenge for us, mainly in countries, in developing countries like Brazil, Latin America, Africa, Asia, etc., because they have to get this good relationship between institutions responsible for management and the people that use groundwater, and also with support of the society. You have also to consider that there's another door to be opened that is really important and necessary, that groundwater is part of the environment. The discharge of the aquifer keep the rivers with water. 90% of the rivers in Brazil have water all the time because of the discharge of groundwater. Otherwise, if you don't have a discharge of groundwater, we could have problems with the maintenance of the water in rivers. That's another way to convince people that it's important to take care with water, groundwater particularly, because it's below surface, nobody can see, and that is invisible in many sense, and invisible in terms of management, and invisible for actions. In this way, you have to convince that groundwater is important in different aspects, but the user is part of this management process. Otherwise, we fail, as we still failing in many aspects in many countries.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, indeed, urban water management governance is really challenging. Yeah, so I see that there's a lot of interest in the discussions, and this is because this is a very hot topic, and thanks to both the speakers for creating the platform for such hot discussions. But unfortunately, we're running out of time. So on behalf of my colleagues at NERPS, I would like to once again thank the speakers and also the attendees for finding the time to attend today's webinar. But before closing, I would like to invite once again all of you to visit our website at nerps.org, and also subscribe to our newsletters for updates on our activities. This will include the upcoming webinars. And also, as Professor Kaneko mentioned, I would like to invite all of you to visit the conference website for the NERPS 2023 conference, which will be held on February 28 to March 3 next year in Bangkok. And also the abstract submission is now available, and it will the deadline would be October 30. So I would like to invite all of you to submit your works to the conference. So once again, thank you all. Thank you, Professor Hirata. Thank you, Professor Onodera. And we look forward to seeing you again in our next webinar. Have a nice day.
Have a nice day. Thank you very much.
Bye.